9. As 27. 5. Sea cedar, ash, cypress, and juniper trees are also native to the Lebanon range. 1 Chi 5. 6-8. 2 Chi 19. 23. Issa 60. 13 Among the animals inhabiting this region are jackals, gazelles, hyenas, and wolves. In ancient times both the forests and the wildlife were more abundant. The region was a haunt for lions and leopards. Chi 4. 8. Issa 40. 16 Possibly it was the fragrance of its great forests that was known as the fragrance of Lebanon. Chi 4. 11. The Lebanon region was not conquered by the Israelites under Joshua's leadership, but it came to be the MW border of the land. De 1. 7. 3. 25. 11. 24. Jos 1. 4. 9. 1 The pagan inhabitants of this area, however, served to test Israel's faithfulness to Jehovah. JG 3. 4 centuries later, King Solomon exercised jurisdiction over a part of Lebanon and there did building work. 1 Chi 9. 17-19. 2 Ch 8. 5, 6 Possibly one of his construction projects included the Tower of Lebanon, which is looking out toward Damascus. Chi 7. 4. Some, however, understand this to refer to one of the peaks of Lebanon. At this time Hiram the king of Tyre controlled another portion of Lebanon, from which he supplied Solomon with cedar and juniper timbers. 1 Chi 5. 7-14. Illustrative use. Many of the scriptural references to Lebanon are associated with its fruitfulness. PS 72. 16. Issa 35. 2 And luxuriant forests, particularly its majestic cedars. PS 29. 5 Often Lebanon is used in a figurative way. It is depicted as if in a state of abashment, sympathizing with the land of Judah that has been despoiled by the Assyrian forces. Issa 33. 1. 9 The Assyrian army itself, however, was to experience calamity, being felled like trees of Lebanon. Issa 10. 24-26, 33, 34 Disastrous effects resulting from Jehovah's judgment are compared to the withering of the blossom of Lebanon. Nah 1. 4 However, the turning of Lebanon's forest into a fruitful orchard is alluded to in the restoration prophecy and illustrates a complete reversal of matters. Issa 29. 17, 18. Jehovah, through Jeremiah, said concerning the house of the king of Judah, You are as Gilead to me, O textoi acute muritra longo. Lebaoth 232 The people did not render justice, the house would become a mere devastation. J 22. 1-5 And those dwelling in figurative Lebanon Jerusalem, being nested in the cedars, would experience calamity. J 22. 23. See also as 17. 2, 3. Similarly, the desire of Assyrian king Sennacherib to ascend the height of Mount Venus regions, the remotest parts of Lebanon, and to cut down its lofty cedars appears to allude to his intentions concerning Jerusalem. Issa 37. 21-24 The prophetic words regarding the violence done to Lebanon had to. 17 may refer to calamity in store for Jerusalem. Or they are perhaps to be understood literally as denoting the depletion of Lebanon's forests through the ravages of war. Compare Issa 14. 5-8. Zechariah's prophecy 10. 10 pointed to the time when Jehovah would bring his people back to the land of Gilead and Lebanon. In this case Lebanon may refer to the territory W of the Jordan, as Gilead designates the land D of the Jordan. Lebaoth la middle Baoth Lionesses. A city in the southern part of the territory of Judah. Jos 15. 21, 32, apparently also called Beth Lebaoth and assigned as such to the tribe of Simeon. Jos 19. 1, 2, 6. See Beth Lebaoth. Lubka my heart of those rising up against me. This appears to be a cryptographic name for Chaldee, or Dim. It occurs only at Jeremiah 51. 1, in a statement regarding what Jehovah would do to Babylon and the inhabitants of Chaldee. The term is employed there in keeping with a system called athbash, in which the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet Tor represents the first letter thereof Aleph, the second last letter Shin represents the second Beit, and so forth. Hence, at Jeremiah 51. When the real name Kazmiddle.tim is disguised by forming the Hebrew word Levkamiddle.Malibkamai. For Libkamai the Greek Septuagint has the Chaldeans and the Targums read the land of the Chaldeans. Lebanelamiddle.Bonar. A place mentioned as a reference point in connection with the location of Zillow. JG 21. 19 It is tentatively identified with El-Luban Shakia, about 5 km 3 mi WNW of the suggested site of Zillow. However, the Bible's placing of Zillow toward the south of Lebanon may indicate that originally the city was farther than this suggested site. Lekalaka. Probably a descendant of Judah through a 1ch4. 21 On the basis of the context, it has been suggested that Leka was a village, but the location of such a place is unknown. Leechheb. Alumiddle.G. A blood-sucking worm with a flat, segmented body that tapers at both ends, but is broadest toward the posterior part. Leeches measure from over 1 cm 0.5 inches to over 10 cm 4 inches in length. These creatures have a disc, or sucker, at each end of the body, the one at the head end being equipped with biting jaws. Leeches are found in great numbers in many streams and rivers of the Middle East. The young of one variety Limnodis nilotica, when swallowed with the drinking water, attach themselves to the nasal cavities, larynx, or epiglottis of their host. They grow rapidly and are not easily removed. Their presence can hinder breathing and this, as well as loss of blood, sometimes proves fatal to the victim. Sole mention is made of the leechheb. Aluka at Proverbs 30:15, where the reference is to insatiable greed, it being stated that the leeches have 2 daughters that cry. Give. Give. The commentary by F.C. Cook suggests that the leech's greed is here viewed as its daughter, spoken of in the plural to express intensity. Others consider the 2 daughters to be a reference to the 2 lips of its blood-sucking disc. A leech may consume 3 times its own weight in blood, a strong anticoagulant in its saliva ensuring a continuous flow from the victim. Leekheb. Chow-middle.Sire. One of the items of diet for which the mixed crowd and the Israelites longed while in the wilderness. Nuo textoi acute muritra longo, legal case 233 leg. The limb of a man or an animal used to support the body and for walking. In connection with the installation of the priesthood, the right leg of the ram of the installation constituted a part of the wave offering. Late. 22, 25-27 In certain sacrifices, the right hind leg, evidently the choice upper part of it, was also given as a sacred portion to the officiating priest. The 7. 32-34. 10. 12, 14, 15 The front leg, the shoulder or shoulder blade literally, arm, is also mentioned as a portion for the priests, at Numbers 6. 19 and Deuteronomy 18. 3. Insects having leaper legs heb. Pyramidal.im were the only winged swarming creatures designated by the law as clean for food. Law 11. 21 Elsewhere, the same Hebrew term refers to the shanks of animals. See shank. Jehovah prophetically told Babylon. Strip off the flowing skirt. Uncover the leg. Cross over the rivers. Isra 47. 1, 2 Instead of being a pampered queen who is served, she figuratively had to uncover her legs to the hip to wade barefoot as a captive across the rivers through which her conquerors would drag her. Legs were also used figuratively to represent mightiness or human swiftness and power. At Psalm 147. 10 we read, Not in the mightiness of the horse does Jehovah take delight, nor in the legs of the man does he find pleasure. At Proverbs 26. 7 Lame legs are referred to as a symbol of uselessness or incapacity. It appears to have been a Roman custom to perform a coup de grace by breaking the legs of criminals condemned to die on the stake in order to shorten their miseries. The soldiers, at the Jews' request, broke the legs of the men impaled on stakes alongside Jesus Christ but, finding Jesus already dead, did not break his legs. Consequently, the prophecy at Psalm 34:20 was fulfilled. Job 19. 31-36. Compare X 12. 46. New 9. 12. Legal case. A matter to be settled in a judicial court. A legal hearing or trial. The principal Hebrew verb having to do with legal cases is rive, meaning quarrel. Contend. Conduct a legal case. GE 26. 20. to 33. 8. PR 25. 8. The noun form is rendered controversy. Dispute. Case at law. Legal case. X 23. 2. to 17. 8. PS 35. 23. ISA 34. 8. The Hebrew word din judgment is sometimes rendered legal case. Legal claim. Legal contest. Job 35. 14. PS 140. 12. PR 22. 10. A legal case, among God's servants, had as its primary purpose the satisfying of the divine requirements and, secondarily, the rendering of justice to the person or persons involved, along with compensation where such was due. God considered himself involved in even personal offenses between humans, as is noted in Moses' words to Israelite judges at Deuteronomy 1. 16, 17. A legal case was conducted in the Garden of Eden, to bring out the facts of that case and the issues involved, to establish them as a matter of public record, and also to pass sentence on the offenders. Jehovah called Adam and Eve before him for questioning. Though he knew all, he held a hearing, made the charges clear, brought out the facts by questioning, and gave them an opportunity to make expression in their own defense. He obtained a confession from the offenders. Jehovah then made his decision in the matter and, with justice and undeserved kindness, applied the law, exercising mercy toward Adam and Eve's unborn offspring by deferring the execution of the death sentence upon the offenders for a time. GE 3. 6-19. Jehovah God the Supreme Judge here set the pattern for all further judicial proceedings among his people. GE 3. 1-24 Legal cases conducted according to God's judicial regulations were for the finding and discussion of facts for the purpose of rendering justice. Where possible, justice tempered with mercy. The 16. 20. PR 28. 13. Compare Mount 5. 7. Just 2. 13. The entire procedure was meant to keep the nation of Israel uncontaminated and to provide for the individual welfare of its members as o textoi acute miritra longo. Legal case 234 present when testimony was presented against him and could make his defense. No equivalent of a public prosecutor appears in either patriarchal or Israelite courts. Neither was an attorney for the defense necessary. Proceedings were without court costs to the litigants. A person with a civil matter or a complainant in a criminal matter would bring his case to the judges. The other party would be called, witnesses were gathered together, and the hearing was conducted usually in a public place, most often at the city gates. De 21. 19. Rue 4. When the judges would question the litigants and examine the evidence and testimony, they would render a verdict without delay unless evidence was lacking, or if the matter was too difficult, the judges would refer the case to a higher court. Sentences, such as flogging and the death penalty, were carried out immediately. There was no provision in the law for imprisonment. Custody was employed only in a case in which Jehovah had to be consulted for a decision. La 24. 12. See Court, Judicial. Crime and Punishment. Guilt always brought liability. There were no exceptions. Guilt could not be overlooked. Wherever the law demanded it, punishment had to be administered or, in some cases, compensation made. Then the guilty one, in order to make peace with God, was required to present an offering at the sanctuary. Sacrifices for atonement were required in any case of guilt. The 5. 1-19 Even unintentional sin brought guilt, and offerings had to be made for atonement. The 4. 1-35 In certain wrongdoings, including deception, fraud, and extortion, where a person voluntarily repented and confessed, he had to make compensation and also present a guilt offering. The 6. 1-7. Evidence. If a person was a witness to apostate acts, sedition, murder, which defiled the land, or certain other serious crimes, he was under obligation to report it and to testify to what he knew, or he would be subject to divine curse, publicly proclaimed. The 5. 1. The 13. 8. Compare PR 29. 24. As 6. 2. One witness was not enough to establish a matter, however. 2 or more were required. New 35. 30. To 17. 6. 19. 15. Compare Jo 8. 17, 18. 1 to 5. 19. Heb 10. 28. Witnesses were commanded by the law to speak the truth. X 20. 16. 23. 7, and were, in some cases, put under oath. Mount 26. 63. This would especially be so when the one on whom suspicion fell was the only witness to the matter. X 22. 10, 11. Since those in a legal case before the judges or at the sanctuary for judgment of a matter were regarded as standing before Jehovah, witnesses were to recognize that they were accountable to God. X 22. 8. The 1. 17. 19. 17. A witness was not to accept a bribe, allow anyone wicked to persuade him to speak untruthfully, or scheme violence. X 23. 1. 8. He was not to let his testimony be swayed by pressure of a crowd or by the wealth or poverty of those involved in the case. X 23. 2. 3. Even the closest family relationship was not to hold one back from testifying against a wicked violator of the law, such as an apostate or rebellious one. The 13. 6-11. 21. 18-21. Zek 13. 3. One who proved to be a false witness received the punishment that the person accused would have received if found guilty. The 19. 17-21. Witnesses in all capital convictions were required to throw the first stone in the execution of the convicted one. Thus witnesses were enjoined by law to demonstrate their zeal for true, clean worship and for clearing out what was bad in Israel. This would also act as a deterrent to false testimony. It would take a very callous person to make a false accusation, knowing that he had to be the first to act in putting the accused to death. To 17. 7. Material and circumstantial evidence. In case livestock had been entrusted to the care of another, the responsible one could bring in the torn body of an animal that had been killed by a wild beast as evidence, and that would owe text to a acute miritra longo. Legend 235. The matter would not have been taken to Jehovah in this manner, but she would have been adjudged guilty by the judges and stoned to death. New 5. 11-31. Documents. Records, or documents, of various kinds were used. A husband was required to give his wife a certificate of divorce when putting her away. The 24. 1. J 3. 8. Compare ISA 50. 1. Genealogical records were available, as we see particularly in 1 Chronicles. Mention is made of deeds registering the sale of real estate. J 32. 9-11. Many letters were written, some of which may have been retained and may have figured in legal cases. 2 Sir 11. 14. 1 Chi 21. 8-14. 2 Chi 10. 1. NE 2. 7. Jesus' trial. The greatest travesty of justice ever committed was the trial and sentencing of Jesus Christ. Prior to his trial, the chief priests and elder men of the people took counsel together with a view to putting Jesus to death. So the judges were prejudiced and had their minds made up on the verdict before ever the trial took place. Mount 26. 3. For they bribed Judas to betray Jesus to them. Luke 22. 2-6. Because of the wrongness of their actions, they did not arrest him in the temple in the daytime, but they waited until they could act under cover of darkness and then sent a crowd armed with clubs and swords to arrest him in an isolated place outside the city. Luke 22. 52-53. Jesus was then taken first to the house of Annas, the ex-high priest, who still wielded great authority, his son-in-law Caiaphas being the high priest at the time. Joe 18:13 There Jesus was questioned and was slapped in the face. Joe 18:22 Next he was led bound to Caiaphas the high priest. False witnesses were sought by the chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin. Many such witnesses came forward but could not agree on their testimony, except two who twisted Jesus' words recorded at John 2:19. Mount 26. 59-61. Mr. 14. 56-59 Finally Jesus was put under oath by the high priest and questioned as to whether he was the Christ, the Son of God. When Jesus answered in the affirmative and alluded to the prophecy at Daniel 7:13, the high priest stripped his garments and called upon the court to find Jesus guilty of blasphemy. This verdict was rendered, and he was sentenced to death. After this they spit in his face and hit him with their fists, taunting him, contrary to the law. Mount 26. 57-68. Luke 22. 66-71. Compared to 25. 1-2 with Joe 7. 51 and Act 23. 3. After this illegal night trial the Sanhedrin met early in the morning to confirm their judgment and for a consultation. Mr. 15. 1 Jesus was now led, again bound, to the governor's palace, to Pilate, since they said, "It is not lawful for us to kill anyone." Joe 18:31 Here Jesus was charged with forbidding the paying of taxes to Caesar and with saying that he himself was Christ the King. Blasphemy against the God of the Jews would not have been so serious a charge in the eyes of the Romans, but sedition would. Pilate, after making futile attempts to get Jesus to testify against himself, told the Jews that he found no crime in him. Discovering, however, that Jesus was a Galilean, Pilate was happy to send him to Herod, who had jurisdiction over Galilee. Herod questioned Jesus, hoping to see a sign performed by him, but Jesus refused. Herod then discredited Jesus, making fun of him, and sent him back to Pilate. Luke 23. 1-11. Pilate now tried to release Jesus in harmony with a custom of that time, but the Jews refused, calling for the release of a seditionist and murderer instead. Joe 18:38-40 Pilate therefore had Jesus scourged, and the soldiers again mistreated him. After this, Pilate brought Jesus outside and tried to get his release, but the Jews insisted. Impale him. Impale him. Finally he issued the order to have Jesus impaled. Mount 27. 15-26. Luke 23. 13-25. Joe 19. 1-16. What laws of God did the Jewish text acute miritra longo Labim 236 possessed by many demons? Possibly the chief one of these demons caused this man to say that his name was Legion. The fact that in the 1st century CE Roman legions usually consisted of 6,000 men may give some indication of the large number of demons involved. So fierce were the demon-possessed man and his companion that no one dared to pass the area where they had their dwelling among the tombs. Under demon influence the man who said his name was Legion walked about naked, and day and night he cried aloud and slashed himself with stones. All efforts to bind him, even with fetters and chains, were unsuccessful. Christ Jesus, however, freed this man and his companion from the power of the demons. Thereafter the expelled demons took possession of a herd of swine and caused these to rush over a precipice to their death in the Sea of Galilee. Mount 8. 28-34. Mr. 5. 1-20. Luke 8. 26-39. Segadarans. Swine. For details about the Roman legions, see Army Roman. Habim the middle dot Habim. A name appearing at Genesis 10. 13 and 1 Chronicles 1. 11 among the descendants of Ham through Mizraim. Since the Hebrew name is a plural form, many scholars hold that a tribe taking its name from one of Mizraim's sons is meant. See, however, Mizraim. The Habim are generally identified with the Libyans and at least seem to have constituted one of the tribes inhabiting Libya in ancient times. While identification is difficult, they were probably the same as the Lumidal.vim mentioned elsewhere in the Hebrew text, as at 2 Chronicles 12. 3, where the American Standard Version reads Libim and other translations read Libyans. Mo. N.W. R.S. Lehi high jawbone. The scene of one or, possibly, two Israelite victories over the Philistines. Its exact location is unknown today. Some identify it with but as Suyag, which perhaps derives its name from the Greek word see gon jawbone, less than 3 kilometers to me of Beth Shemesh. At Lehi, Samson struck down 1,000 Philistines with the moist jawbone of an ass. Subsequently he called the site Ramath Lehi, meaning lofty place of the jawbone, probably to memorialize the victory Jehovah had given him there. JG 15. 9-19 Originally, though, Lehi may have got its name from the shape of its crags. Later, according to the rendering of numerous translators, Shammah struck down many Philistines assembled at Lehi. 2 23. 11, 12. At JB, NW, RS however, the Hebrew term la ya literally means into the 10th village, and, by a slight change in vowel pointing, is rendered to Lehi. Lemu belonging to God. An unidentified king of ancient times whose words are recorded in Proverbs chapter 31. His identity has been the subject of considerable discussion, some commentators suggesting that Lemuel was another name for Solomon. Others identify Lemuel with Hezekiah. The words of King Lemuel constitute the weighty message that his mother gave to him in correction. PR 31. 1. However, the time and circumstances of the king's reception of such information from his mother are unknown. This weighty message advises against involvement with a bad woman, warns of how intoxicating liquor can pervert judgment, highlights the need to judge righteously, and then describes a good wife. Lentil Heb. Adamiddle.Shah. An annual plant of the legume family that has long been cultivated by man and is still extensively grown in Egypt and Israel, as well as in other lands. 2 17. 27, 28. 23. 11. This small plant lends esculenta, measuring from 15 to 46 centimeters 6 to 18 inches in height, thrives in light, dry soil. Its compound leaves, generally consisting of 6 pairs of oblong leaflets, terminate in tendrils. Slender branchlets bear 2 to 4 small pelic flowers each. The short pods that develop from the flowers resemble those of the pea, and usually they contain 2 small lens-shaped seeds. The color of the seeds and that of the flowers differs with Otextoi acute muritra longo. Leprosy 237. In the scriptures, allusion is made to the swiftness of the leopard Hab 1. 8. And its manner of lying in wait near towns, ready to pounce upon passing domestic animals. J 5. 6. Ho 13. 7. In sharp contrast with this, the leopard and the kid are depicted as lying down together in peace during Messiah's rule. Issar 11. 6. At Daniel 7. 6, the four-winged, four-headed leopard represents the Grecian world power, which conquered Medo-Persia with the swiftness of a leopard. Also, the wild beast out of the sea, seen in vision by the Apostle John, was basically like a leopard. Re 13. 1, 2. Sea beasts, symbolic. The Hebrew word la-ish, otherwise translated lion job 4. 11. PR 30. 30, is rendered leopard at Isaiah 30. 6 NW, the line la middle. 6 already having been mentioned in the same text. Leprosy. A disease designated in the Bible by the Hebrew terms a middle. Rath and the Greek word lepra. A person afflicted with it is called a leper. In the scriptures leprosy is not restricted to the disease known by that name today, for it could affect not only humans but also clothing and houses. But 14. 55. The leprosy of today is otherwise called Hansen's disease, so named because Dr. Gerhard A. Hansen discovered the germ that is generally thought to cause this malady. However, though the middle. Rath applies to more than the leprosy of today, there is no doubt that human leprosy, now called Hansen's disease, was in evidence in the Middle East in biblical times. Varieties, with their effects. Today leprosy, or Hansen's disease, which is only slightly communicable, manifests itself in 3 basic varieties. 1. The nodular type, results in a thickening of one's skin and the forming of lumps, first in the skin on the face and then on other parts of the body. it also produces degenerative effects in mucous membranes of the victim's nose and throat. This is known as black leprosy. Another type is anesthetic leprosy, sometimes called white leprosy. It is not as severe as black leprosy and basically affects the peripheral nerves. It may manifest itself in skin that is painful to the touch, though it can also result in numbness. The third type of leprosy, a mixed kind, combines the symptoms of both forms just described. As leprosy progresses toward its advanced stage, the swellings that initially develop discharge pus, the hair may fall from one's head and eyebrows, nails may loosen, decay, and fall off. Then the victim's fingers, limbs, nose, or eyes may be slowly eaten away. Finally, in the most serious cases, death ensues. That biblical leprosy certainly included such a serious disease is apparent from Aaron's reference to it as a malady wherein the flesh is half eaten off. New 12. This description helps one better to appreciate biblical references to this dread malady and the dire consequences of using its presumptuous act in improperly endeavoring to offer incense in Jehovah's temple. 2 Chi 15. 5. 2 Ch 26. 16-23. Diagnosis. By means of the Mosaic Law, Jehovah provided Israel with information enabling the priest to diagnose leprosy and to distinguish between it and other less serious skin afflictions. From what is recorded at Leviticus 13. 1-46, it can be seen that leprosy might begin with an eruption, a scab, a blotch, a boil, or a scar in one's flesh from fire. Sometimes the symptoms were very clear. The hair in the affected area had turned under Messiah's rule, the scriptures foretell. The leopard and the kid will lie down together in peace. Leprosy 238 white, and the malady was seen to be deeper than the skin. For example, a white eruption in the skin might turn the hair white, and raw flesh might appear in the eruption. This meant that one had leprosy and was to be declared unclean. However, in other cases the malady was not deeper than the skin and a period of quarantine was imposed, with subsequent inspection by the priest, who made a final determination in the case. It was acknowledged that leprosy could reach a stage in which it was not contagious. When it overspread the entire body, all of it having turned white, and living flesh was not in evidence, it was a sign that the diseased action was over and that only the marks of its ravages remained. The priest would then declare the victim clean, the disease posing no further danger to anyone. Le 13. 12-17. If the leper's malady left him and he was cured, there were arrangements whereby he could ceremonially purify himself, and these included the offering of sacrifice in his behalf by the priest. Le 14. 1-32 But if the priest declared the uncured leper unclean, the leper's garments were to be torn, his head was to become ungroomed, he was to cover the mustache or upper lip, and he was to call out unclean, unclean. He had to dwell in isolation outside the camp. Le 13. 43-46. A measure that was taken so that the leper would not contaminate those in the midst of whom Jehovah was tenting. New 5. 1-4 It seems that in biblical times lepers associated with one another or lived in groups, making it possible for them to aid one another. 2 Chi 7. 3-5. Lu 17. 12. In garments and houses. Leprosy could also affect woolen or linen garments, or an article of skin. The plague might disappear with washing, and there were arrangements for quarantining the article. But where this yellowish-green or reddish plague persisted, malignant leprosy was present and the article was to be burned. Le 13. 47-59 If yellowish-green or reddish depressions appeared in the wall of a house, the priest imposed a quarantine. It might be necessary to tear out affected stones and have the house scraped off inside, the stones and scraped off mortar being disposed of in an unclean place outside the city. If the plague returned, the house was declared unclean and was pulled down, and the materials were disposed of in an unclean place. But for the house pronounced clean there was an arrangement for purification. Le 14. 33-57 It has been suggested that the leprosy affecting garments or houses was a type of mildew or mold. However, about this there is uncertainty. As a sign. One of the signs Jehovah empowered Moses to perform to prove to the Israelites that God had sent him involved leprosy. As instructed, Moses stuck his hand in the upper fold of his garment, and upon his withdrawing it, his hand was stricken with leprosy like snow. It was restored like the rest of his flesh by his returning it into the upper fold of his garment and withdrawing it once again. X4. 6, 7 Miriam was stricken with leprosy as white as snow as a divine act, because she spoke against Moses. He begged God to heal her, which was done, but she was quarantined outside the camp for 7 days. New 12. 1, 2, 9-15. In Elisha's time. Naaman the Syrian was a valiant, mighty man, though a leper or struck with skin disease. 2 Kai 5. 1. FTN his pride nearly lost him the opportunity of being cured, but he eventually did as instructed by Elisha, plunging into the Jordan 7 times, and his flesh came back like the flesh of a little boy and he became clean. 2 Kai 5. 14 He thereupon became a worshipper of Jehovah. However, Elisha's attendant Gehazi greedily acquired a gift from Naaman in the prophet's name, thus misrepresenting his master and, in effect, making the undeserved kindness of God a means of material gain. For his misdeed, Gehazi was stricken with leprosy by God and became a leper white as snow. 2 Kai 5. 20-27. O textoi acute muritra longo, leveling instrument 239, and fell upon his face at Jesus' feet, thanking him for what had been done in his behalf. Lu 17. 11-19 It may also be noted that Christ was in Bethany at the home of Simon the leper whom Jesus may have cured when Mary anointed Jesus with costly perfumed oil a few days before his death. Mount 26. 6-13. Mr. 14. 3-9. Joe 12. 1-8. Leshem. Alternate name for the city of Laish, later called Dan. Joe's 19. 47. JD 18. 7, 27, 29. See Dan no. 3. Leshem stone Leshem. An unidentified precious stone that was placed first in the third row of gems on the high priest's breastpiece of judgment. X28. 15, 19. 39. 12. Various stones, such as amber, hyacinth, opal, and tourmaline, have been suggested as being identical with Leshem stone, but none of these identifications can be substantiated. The New World Translation therefore leaves the Hebrew word untranslated as Leshem stone. Letters. The writing and sending of official, business, and personal letters was a widely used means of communication in ancient times. 2 Sir 11. 14. 2 Kai 5. 5-7. 10. 1, 2. 2 Ch 30. 1. Es 4. 7. Issa 37. 14. J 29. 1. Act 9. 1, 2. 28. 21. 2 Th 2. 2. Heb 13. 22. The Hebrew words for refers to anything that is written and has the various meanings book, letter, writing, certificate, deed, written document. The Greek word gramma can denote a letter of the alphabet or a written document. 2 Co 3. 7. Act 28. 21 The Greek term *sto is used only with regard to a written message. 1 Co 5. 9. Confidential letters were usually sealed. 1 Kai 21. 8 Sanballat's disrespectful action in sending an open letter to Nehemiah may have been intended to cause the false charges set forth therein to become public knowledge. Ne 6. 5. In addition to papyrus, materials employed for letter writing in ancient times included ostraca, small pieces of broken pottery or earthenware, and clay tablets. Thousands of clay tablets have been found in Babylonia and other regions. Washed and cleaned, smooth clay was made into a tablet and, while still wet, it was imprinted by means of a stylus forming wedge-shaped cuneiform characters. These tablets were often enclosed in clay envelopes. In the case of contracts, the text was sometimes repeated on the envelope. The envelopes were sealed and then baked in a kiln or dried in the sun to make them hard and durable. See archaeology. Letter writing was often done by professional scribes. As in the Persian court, such scribes were usually on hand to take down official government correspondence. As 8. 9. As 4. 8 scribes were also to be found in the marketplaces near city gates, where they could be engaged by the populace to write letters and to record business transactions. Letters were sometimes delivered by messengers 2K 19. 14. Runners 2ch 30. 6. Or couriers as 3. 13. 8. 14. Postal service itself seems to have been restricted to official correspondence down to Roman times. So average persons had to rely on traveling acquaintances or merchants to deliver their letters. Anciently, letters of recommendation were also used. However, the Apostle Paul did not need such letters to or from the Christians at Corinth to prove that he was a minister. He had helped them to become Christians and therefore could say, "You yourselves are our letter, inscribed on our hearts, and known and being read by all mankind." 2 Co 3. 1-3. In the 1st century CE, letters from Paul, James, Peter, John, Jude, and the governing body in Jerusalem contributed to the growth and the preservation of the unity and cleanness of the Christian congregation. Act 15. 22-31. 16. 4, 5. 2 Co 7. 8, 9. 10. 8-11. Letushim the middle dot ushim, possibly from a root meaning sharpen. Hammer. Forge. A name appearing among the descendants of Abraham and Keturah through Dedan. GE 25. 3. This name has the plural Hebrew ending im, as do the names as Shurim and Loamim appearing in the same O-text to acute Miritra Longo, Levi 240 ancient times to achieve horizontal accuracy when building walls and various structures, while the plummet was used to assure vertical accuracy. Egyptian masons seem to have employed a level shaped like the letter A with a short plumb line suspended from the apex. Evidently when the hanging line coincided with the center mark on the crossbar, this indicated that the surface on which it was placed was level. The scriptures furnish no description of leveling instruments, however, and they refer to this device only in figurative ways. A leveling instrument may be used to construct a building properly or to test its fitness for preservation. Jehovah foretold that he would apply to wayward Jerusalem the measuring line applied to Samaria and also the leveling instrument applied to the house of Ahab. God had measured and found Samaria and the house of King Ahab to be morally bad or crooked, resulting in their destruction. Likewise, God would judge Jerusalem and its rulers, exposing their wickedness and bringing about the destruction of that city. These events actually occurred in 607 BCE to Car 21. 10-13. 10. 11 through Isaiah. The various wicked braggarts and rulers of the people in Jerusalem were apprised of their coming calamity and of Jehovah's declaration. I will make justice the measuring line and righteousness the leveling instrument. The standards of true justice and genuine righteousness would reveal who were really God's servants and who were not, resulting in either preservation or destruction. Issa 28. 14-19. Levi 6 adherents. Joint. 1. Jacob's third son by his wife Leah, born in Paddan Aram. GE 35. 23, 26. At his birth Leah said, "Now this time my husband will join himself to me, because I have borne him 3 sons." The boy was therefore called Levi, the meaning of this name evidently being linked with Leah's hope for a new bond of affection between her and Jacob. GE 29. 34. Levi became the father of Gershon, Gershom, Kohath, and Merari, founders of the 3 principal divisions of the Levites. GE 46. 11. 1ch 6. 1, 16. Levi, along with his brother Simeon, took drastic action against the defilers of their sister Dinah. GE 34. 25, 26, 31. This expression of violent anger was cursed by Jacob, who foretold that Levi's descendants would be scattered in Israel, a prophecy that was fulfilled when the Levites were indeed scattered throughout 48 Levite cities in the territories of Israel's various tribes in the land of Canaan. GE 49. 7. Jos 21. 41 Levi accompanied Jacob into Egypt and died there at 137 years of age. X